There's certainly a lot of noise out there still about a housing market crash in 2023, how it's going to be like 2008 Great Recession, and we're going to see double-digit drop in prices. Well, I'm here to tell you that I don't see it happening. And we're going to cover a few reasons why, including inventory, interest rates, and inflation and how they're correlated, recession, and unemployment. So let's get started with my favorite topic, inventory. Are you getting tired of me talking about inventory yet? Well, the reason I keep talking about it is for this specific reason. You can see here that total inventory remains extremely low. We were at 980,000 units in April. This is in contrast to the peak of the financial crisis, which we were at over 4 million units. 1.3 months of inventory currently. A normal market is considered 4 to 6 months. New homes being built. Leading to the Great Recession, there was 7.6 million in the 5 years preceding that. In the 5 years preceding today, we've had 4.6 million units. New building permits are down. As far as existing home sales, everybody thought the baby boomers were going to retire and sell their homes. All this inventory was going to come to market. Well, guess what? Baby boomers, who most of them have little to no mortgage, have decided overall to age in place. So that inventory is not hitting market. As far as other existing homeowners, most of them are sitting on mortgages that are in the 2 to 3% range, and they're not going to exit the home for no reason to take on a higher mortgage payment. So right now we're not seeing the inventory rise, and unless it's a life event, we're probably not going to see it anytime soon unless we see interest rates come down significantly. So inventory will remain an issue. So you want to know what interest rates are going to do? Well, just follow the inflation numbers. Take a look at the chart here. You can clearly see a correlation between the 30-year mortgage rate, the 10-year treasury rate, and the inflation numbers. And the good news for us is the inflation numbers look like they're starting to come down. Two big reports came out last week. First was the Consumer Price Index, and that was at a 4.9% growth rate, which was down from 5% the previous month and down from a high of 9% in June of last year. And then you had the Producer Price Index, and that was at a 0.2% growth rate month over month and a 2.3% annual growth rate. And that annual growth rate was the lowest since 2021. So both are showing signs of decline, which is good news for the interest rates, and it also gives reason for the Fed to pause going forward. So stay tuned and see what happens next. So there's been a lot of talk about an impending recession, but what exactly does that mean for home prices? Well, first of all, the housing market itself has been in a recession since summer of last year. And a lot of times housing will lead us into and out of a recession. And the good news on housing is we have seen some indicators that maybe we bottomed out at the end of last year, beginning of this year, and we're starting to see signs of improvement, though it's early yet. As far as overall market recession, a lot of economists do think that we're going to have one later this year. And the one piece that has been resilient is the jobs market. We'll talk about that next. But overall, if we have a recession, what's that do for home prices? Well, if you look at the chart here, you can see in 4 out of the last 6 recessions, we actually saw home prices increase. 1991, we did see a slight decrease of less than 2%. And 2008 was a completely different story. And as far as interest rates in the recession, you can see here that in all 6 of the last recessions, we actually saw a decline in interest rates. So that could be good news, of course, for the interest rate market. And overall, with interest rates and house prices, it may not be the worst thing if we have a recession. So how does unemployment play into all this? How does it affect housing prices, or does it? Well, first, let's look at what's happening with unemployment right now. Last week, we saw the initial jobless claims tick up to 264,000, but it's still well below the 325,000 roughly that we're targeting on a 4-week moving average to tip us into a recession. But as far as the unemployment, you can tell from this chart here that historically it's hit a cyclical low prior to a recession. And guess what? In January, we hit a 53-year low of 3.4%, and it's been slightly trending up since then. So maybe that's the start of the next recession. And as you can see, unemployment climbs through and peaks just after all the last recessions. What's it going to mean to housing prices? Well, we talked about before, in 4 out of the last 6 recessions, we actually saw housing prices go up. But a lot of people say, well, with unemployment, you're going to see increased foreclosures or people just selling their home because they can't pay for their mortgage. and they want to get out. So inventory is going up. Well, first let's talk about foreclosures. Why we're not going to see a big uptick in foreclosures, and that's because there's just too much equity. We are at the highest point of equity historically. And so most people, if they do lose their jobs and they have to sell, they're just going to outright sell. It's not getting to foreclosure because the majority of people have a lot of equity. Next, we come to outright sales. Yes, we may run into a situation where we have a lot of people selling, but guess what? There's a lot of pent-up demand out there. And as we saw before, in a lot of cases, interest rates will come down during a recession. And with a decline in interest rates, we have a much more pent-up demand than we would see a rise in inventory from sellers. So we've got plenty of people waiting on the sideline to take up any increase in inventory. So therefore, we don't see any decline in home prices based on unemployment. So what's this all mean? What it means is we're not going to see major house price declines like we saw during the Great Recession. And why? Because we're not in a similar situation as the Great Recession. We have the most home equity we've ever seen. Sure, we're going to see pockets of places like Boise, Idaho, Austin, Texas, parts of the Southwest that have seen declines. They went up a lot faster and a lot higher than other places in the country. And of course, they've come down somewhat. But overall, nationally, we're not going to see it. We're in a much better place. We didn't have the loose lending practices that we had before the Great Recession. We didn't have the mass foreclosure start years prior to the Great Recession. It's a totally different market. It's not going to happen. And quite frankly, I'm more worried about the opposite, and that is hitting a recession, having interest rates decline. There's so many people on the sideline waiting to get in that all of a sudden we're going to be back into the 2021 timeframe where people start doing things like waiving inspections, appraisal gaps, bidding over ask, etc. So that's my 2 cents. Tell me what you think. You got questions? I got answers. Give me a call.